I want to thank the Richardson-Garland Tea Party for this opportunity tonight. Thank you very much. Well, I'm a fifth-generation Texan. I was born here in Dallas, the Dallas area, raised here. I attended the University of Texas, graduated there in 1981 with a finance degree. I started my company, Huffines Communities, in 1985. It was a commercial real estate company, and we specialize in apartment construction and land development. I've been married 27 years to my beautiful, perfect wife, Mary Catherine, right over here. We have 5 children, 4 boys and a girl, and I like to brag on my boys. All 4 boys are Eagle Scouts, and speaking of scouting, I spend a lot of my time, spare time in Scouts. I'm Scoutmaster of Troop 125, which is a large troop located at Northwest Highway in Douglas at Northwest Bible Church. My faith in God is everything to me. It's very important to me in my life. I attend Christ the King Catholic Church on Preston Road. I'm a lifelong Republican. I'm a committed constitutional conservative. I've worked and volunteered and helped many conservative candidates over the years, from Reagan to Ted Cruz. I've never run for office before, so you got to get some mercy on me. I'm not running to get a career. I'm not running to make money. I'm not running to protect my business. I'm running to keep Texas from turning into California. We don't have to worry about the Democrats turning Texas blue. We've got liberal Republicans, like my opponent, turning us blue every single day. Texas must become the lighthouse of economic and personal freedom, not only of the United States, but of the world, the entire world. If we lose Texas, we lose everything. I'm giving the voters of Senate District 16 a choice they've never had before, between a true conservative and a career politician who's the most liberal Republican in all Senate. Thank you.
John, to you.
Well, that's an impressive, prepared speech. I'd really like to talk to you from the heart about serving you and the work that we've done together over these years. Throughout my years in office, I have served with distinction. I have gone to Austin and earned the respect of my colleagues. I've become one of the Senate's top leaders. I have taken on, without any hesitation, some of the toughest assignments in the Texas Senate. And so when I talk about solving problems, I'm not talking about simply taking on softball affirmations of party ideology. I'm talking about going down there and actually getting something done for each of you. I've advocated repeatedly for issues that are important to our Tea Party. Securing our borders, ending sanctuary cities, having employers use E-Verify, which I think is long overdue. I secured, as chairman of the Senate's Transportation and Homeland Security Committee, the first allocation of money to be able to put additional troops on the border to further secure our border. Because we knew, we saw year after year, the federal government was not going to step in and do the job that we had expected of it. And I've also been an advocate as a business owner of zero-based budgeting. I've been outspoken on this issue for years, and I think we have the votes necessary to see this actually come into existence in Austin. Because I believe there is more money that can be saved. There's a better job that we can do. One of the things you know me for, those of you who know me, is that I talk straight with my constituents. Maybe sometimes even a little too bluntly. But the fact is, I'm truthful. The fact is, I serve with integrity. And the fact is, I think people that don't campaign with integrity are very unlikely to serve with any. I hope you're paying particularly close attention to this campaign. You're looking at the type of material that's coming in your mailbox. Outrageous by any standard. For 30 years, I've worked along with many of you to build this Republican Party, and I have never seen in that time a campaign so disgraceful as the one my opponent has waged.
All right, let's jump right into it. Rainy day fund. We always hear politicians talk about rainy day funds anytime times get tough, anytime they're a little short here. But then at the same time, we also hear people talk about the rainy day fund and they say, oh, well, it's sacred. You can't go there. We got to have it. But there's a reason why it's called the rainy day fund. So people immediately, 3 months later, will be like, oh, we got to use it. So with the rainy day fund, and I'll start with you, Don, for what reason would you advocate taking money out of the rainy day fund?
Well, the only reason we're taking money out of it now is because we've got legislators down in Austin that aren't willing to make the hard calls and prioritize their spending. They raided the rainy day fund for the water. You know, The rainy day fund is there for an emergency. It's there for like a natural disaster type emergency. It's there so we can not be dependent on the federal government when we really need it. It also acts as security for our debt, which we got a lot of, our credit. We should have a cap on the rainy day fund. There should be a limit to how big it's going to get, and then we can turn that money back to the taxpayers. You know, if we constantly are rating it after every session to get more money, then it's not a rainy day fund.
To you, the same thing. And under what circumstances would you use it? When would you advocate for
I
it?
think the rainy day fund needs to be for catastrophic purposes. Using $2 billion of it recently as a revolving fund to deal with our water shortage is absolutely catastrophic. If you understand the water issue, you know that it is absolutely critical. We're 20 years behind the times in dealing with that issue as the legislature should have done. Don, I got to tell you, if you were more familiar with the legislation, you would already know that there's a cap on the rainy day fund. The rainy day fund cannot exceed approximately $12 billion. After that, the money goes to the general revenue fund. I think that's a mistake. I think that after that cap, then the money ought to go back to the taxpayers. We ought to cease the tax. I don't think you ought to be taxing excess money beyond a reasonable catastrophic reserve. Unfortunately, the legislature is looking at that money now as a means to support other things, as it always has a tendency to do. And as a conservative, as I look at these issues, and I study them as a conservative first, and certainly as a businessman, and as someone reflective of your views, that's something we need to do something about, and I think we have the ability to do that in this next session.
I went down and toured the border a couple times now, and I always see people pointing the finger. I see local officials saying the state's not doing enough. I see the state officials saying, well, we do more, but the federal government's not doing enough. I see the federal government saying, well, we're doing enough. And they need to be quiet down there in Texas. I've witnessed the people coming across the border. I've watched it with my own eyes. What role does the state play, and specifically your position play, and I'll start with you, John, to deal with border security? I mean, it's partly illegal immigration, but really, truly securing the border.
Yeah, the real issue at the state level is not overall immigration policy. That ought to have been done years ago by the federal government. The real issue at the state level is how do you secure that border? Now, understand, that too is really a federal obligation. But as legislators responsible for safeguarding our people here in this state, given what was happening to property owners and ranchers, particularly along the border, we had to step in and do something. And so, as I served as chair of the Transportation and Homeland Security, I was able to secure the first appropriation in the state's history to be able to put additional law enforcement personnel. We started with $125 million in the biennial budget, the 2-year budget. From that, I served for 4.5 years as chairman of that committee, with Homeland Security, again, being one of my top priorities in service. But from that, there are a number of other things we should do. This state should have E-Verify, as I talked about a moment ago, in place. We absolutely should have been able to put an end to sanctuary cities, and I can tell you the votes are in the Texas Senate today to put an end to sanctuary cities. And these are things that we can do to stop Texas from suffering under the effects of illegal immigration. As taxpayers, we all know we can't afford it. We can't afford the cost in our schools. We can't afford the cost on our county hospitals. And let me assure you, immigration is an issue I've been directly involved in Austin, and it's one that I will continue to be involved in.
John, to you, border security. It matters all over the state. We see the effects, we see the violence, we see the crime. What is your plan to help with that? Fix it.
Well, if we lose control of our borders, we lose control of our country. And if it hasn't already happened, it's getting close. It's a federal issue, as we know. And you know, the things the state can do are very specific. We've had 20 years down there of not handling this issue. You know, my opponent voted for creating the DREAM Act. What we need to do is get rid of the magnets that attract illegals to Texas. My opponent voted for the DREAM Act, which is in-state tuition, college tuition for illegal aliens. Those students take away slots from your kids and your grandkids. He voted for expanding health care for illegal aliens, driver's license, things like that. So we need to get rid of the magnets. Look, this problem costs the Texas taxpayers billions of dollars a year, $6 to $8 million a year. It affects us more than it affects any state in the union. It's a huge issue for us. What I want to do is have a clear, loud voice in Austin for somebody to be down there like me to make sure that we get the federal government to pay us back the billions of dollars they owe us for dealing with their problem. I want to end sanctuary cities. I want to reinforce the sheriffs down on the border, give them some more, they're the boots on the ground, give them more equipment, things like that. We can do it, we can work on it, we'll get done.
John, I'll start with you on this one. Medicaid, every couple of years we're hearing something about it's a problem, it's an issue. Is it really, first of all, do you think that Medicaid has a financial problem? And second of all, if you do believe there is a financial problem, how would you resolve it?
Well, this is a perfect example of the overreach of the federal government coming into the state of Texas. And one of the things I want to get done is decouple the federalization of our state. You know, they're blackmailing us with our own money. And, you know, we don't want to take short-term gains for long-term liabilities. We need to keep our promises to people we've made them to, but it's very important that we keep pushing back the federal government the more they keep pushing us. Right now, 30-35% of our budget is related to the federal government. We need to decouple ourselves. We got to get rid of that dependency on the federal money. We can do that.
John, to you. Is it a problem? Is there a financial issue there? If there is, what would you do?
It's a huge problem. I'm not sure what you just said, but I will tell you the answer to it is through block grants. We as a state need to be pressing for block grants relative to handling the Medicaid caseload. But I will tell you one thing with certainty we cannot do, and that is allow Medicaid to be even further expanded. Medicaid right now takes up about 30% of our budget. It is the fastest increasing area of expenditure in the state, faster than higher education, faster than public education, faster than anything. And Medicaid will bankrupt us if we don't get it under control soon. So as controversial as the decision has been by Governor Perry to not expand Medicaid and to not welcome into this state Obamacare, his was the right decision. You cannot allow a program that is already bankrupt, that we clearly can't afford today, to come in and be expanded even further. We just can't do it. The needs are real, but so is the need to be responsible. And while many of our recipients of Medicaid receive it because they truly have no other ability, they don't have the physical means, they don't have the mental means, great many recipients of this very type of aid are just the opposite still today, even after all the reform we do. We've got to continue to reform the system. We've got to go back, as I mentioned earlier, to zero-based budgeting. And if we do those things, we'll be able to at least put a freeze on Medicaid spending so that we can get back to better funding our public schools in those areas of state government that I think matter most to most people in the state.
I want to do an add-on question, and if you guys do normal time for this, so I'm going to start with you, John. I've always wanted to say it's the elephant in the room since we're in this room. It felt like it'd be good to say that. This race has been contentious. I say that because I know the emails that I get, and I usually know what's contentious out there and what's not. So I'm going to start with you, John. What do you think the biggest mischaracterization has been about you by your opponent? And Don, I'm going to ask you the same exact question. John, I'll let you go first.
Well, the biggest mischaracterization is that I'm somehow moderate or liberal. Listen, I'm the very same conservative today that you all eagerly elected years ago. My views haven't changed. What has changed is some of the political ideology and some of these so-called conservative group experts out there that have entered our party politics. People that issue at a whim report cards, whether they have any expertise in the issue or not. We see it all the time. There are groups out of Austin. There are groups that have endorsed my opponent here. They are special purpose groups. Typically, in fact, the loudest are Ron Paul supporters, just like Mr. Huffines is. They are libertarian in their views. They are not mainstream Republican. They're not traditional Republican. These are people that, if they were here today, would think every one of you were liberal. And yet, we as believers in these groups have a tendency to think that whatever they say must come from some expert source. Let me tell you, most of these groups consist of little more than a tabletop computer, 2 or 3 people in a dark room with an opinion, and not much more than that. And we have got to wake up to who it is we trust and what we believe. And I'll go one further. You talked about being a contentious campaign. I have never seen in all my years, as I said earlier, as outrageous a campaign, one outright untruthful statement by my opponent after another. This weekend I opened Saturday's Mail only to be called corrupt. Corrupt on the front, corrupt on the back. no Republican campaign should be operated like that, and you ought to be duly noted for running something totally inappropriate.
Don, to you, same question.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Coach John, it's funny you talk about the scorecards a lot. You have a career score of 58 for all the conservative scorecards averaged together. But let's just talk about an unbiased ranking that was just done by Mark Jones at Rice University. He has no axe to grind in ranking liberal to conservatives. He takes over 500 votes cast in the state legislature, and he ranks all the legislatures liberal to conservative. And unfortunately, Mr. Carona here has been ranked not only the most liberal Republican state senator in Austin, but he's also ranked the most liberal Republican in Austin. And that's over 500 different votes that were cast. So it's not just these wild guys running around with scorecards, it's also a university study that's been done. And I would be upset too if I had a liberal voting record like yours. I mean, what I'm really doing is talking the truth. I speak the truth. We've researched the issue. I research it. And look, the facts are the facts in this case. The facts are the facts. And I wouldn't like the facts exposed to you.
All right, I want to make sure we agree, Don, you're going last, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Everybody's cool? We're good with that. All right. John, to you, I'm going to ask you this question. People voted for you before. Why should they vote for you again over your opponent? And I'll ask you that as you wrap up into your closing remarks.
I'd be glad to. But before I do, in the time allotted, I want to mention this Rice University study that my opponent cites, just like he fails to disclose the full story behind all of his allegations, states that every one of the Republicans, everyone, is a conservative by their rating. They say there's no statistical difference, no material statistical difference between the top and the bottom. All of the Republicans are so tightly together. And so this kind of misinformation, I've had other colleagues say everybody gets in the hot seat eventually, I guess, at Rice University, and I don't question their intellect or their methodology. But you can't make a statement like that, honestly, without telling people the rest of the story. They said not a one Republican was anything but a conservative. I'll also tell you that our own newspaper locally, when endorsing me this past week, one of the key points they made is that Mr. Huffines' campaign has been repeatedly misleading. It's one of the very things. And they were talking about his mail pieces, these attack pieces. 24 of them in a row we've now received. You get one about every 3 days from him. And so, when we talk about, why you should elect me, I would say it's a fairly short list. I've gone down there and I've done exactly what you wanted. I could be a scorecard Republican if that's what you want me to be. I assure you, if this gentleman were in the Senate, that's what he will be. Or you can go down there as somebody who solves problems. I'm involved in every major issue that goes on down there in terms of sitting down, working out a solution. And let me assure you, as a conservative, I always look for the most conservative solution. As a businessman, I always look for the solution that will be best for business and best for our communities. But at the end of the day, my job is not to go down there and get a scorecard with a high rating. My job is to go down and be one of the problem solvers. And I've been that again and again. And so I would ask you to re-elect me because I've kept my promise. I've been somebody who's been honest. I'm someone who's served with integrity despite the claims of my opponent. And I'm somebody who has the experience to go down there and get big things done, not just for this district, but for our state. I would very much appreciate your vote.
Same question for you. Yeah, it's your presentation, but I'm also going to ask a quick question. Everybody says being the new guy, all right, well, why should people vote for you? So I'll lead with that and then let you close it.
Okay, correct. I'll answer it all together. Look, guys, this is an epic battle for the soul of our state. Do you want a senator who has really no solutions? He continues to promote failed liberal policies. He's been there 23 years. He is one of the catalysts of our problems. Do we want a senator that has the worst attendance record, who has endorsed Democrats against Republicans? Someone who's hosted fundraisers for Democrats? Who has made over 100 contributions to Democrats between he and his company? Who has received over $600,000 from trial attorneys, liberal trial attorneys? Do we want someone who's paid 6 lobbyists in the last session of the legislature, whose job was to protect his company while he's a sitting senator? This is an unprecedented abuse of power. He consistently is ranked as the most liberal Republican in Austin. He's so out of touch with our district. He writes legislation to name Interstate 20 Barack Obama Freeway. He did. I've got a copy of it. You can welcome to look at it. I will resolve our problems. I have a clear, definitive plan to fix immigration, transportation, education. I've signed a term limit pledge. I've signed a no tax pledge. I will bring new ideas, a fresh approach of seeing beyond the obvious. I've been endorsed by every major conservative organization in the state of Texas. Just last week, I got Senator Rand Paul was in town endorsing me. This week, Senator Rick Santorum has endorsed me. I can tell you this. I will not compromise my faith in God, my constitutional convictions, nor my core beliefs in liberty. I will represent you. I work for you. I'm employed by you. We are winning. I will keep Austin moving and shaking. And remember, Huffines has it.
There are your candidates for the Texas Senate District 16. John, thank you both for coming out. We enjoyed it. Thank you, guys. All right, we got one last one.